Are you working on your author career but struggling to get that first book published?
Like finding a
Does
new
the goal
special
of being an author seem too lofty?
same old books
Or
from
thoughts
the
of
same
having
old
multiple
authors?
books and
Well
making
then,
a full-time
welcome
living
to
are as
Discovered
fantastical as
Wordsmiths,
living in Cinderella's
a podcast
castle?
where you can hear from
Welcome to
fantastic
Discovered
new authors.
Wordsmiths, a
Join
podcast
Stephen
where
Schneider as he
aspiring
finds and
authors can
talks
be
to
heard.
authors you may
Join
not
Stephen
know,
Schneider
but
as he
authors
finds
that
and
have worked
talks to
hard to
authors you may
write
not
great new
know,
books.
but authors
Hear
that
about
have
their book
gotten
and
their
why
foot
you
on the
should
author
check it
career
out.
path.
So
Hear what
sit
they've
back
done
and
to get
listen
there
to
and where
today's
they want to go
Discovered
now.
Wordsmith.
Settle back. It's time for a bit of inspiration and advice. Come listen to today's Discovered Wordsmith.
Today I have Jen Westcott. I am talking to her about her young adult time travel historical fiction book called A Tangle of Time. She loves the outdoors and has used a lot of her hiking time with her dogs to think about the book and dictate the book to write it. She's got a lot of great lessons, so please welcome Jen, and I hope you try out the book. And if you are enjoying this podcast, please go leave a review. It'll help others discover us. So here's Jen. Great. Well, Jen, thank you. I appreciate you taking some time to talk about your book, a little bit about yourself. So first of all, let's just start with a little bit about you, what you like to do outside of writing, some of your hobbies, anything you'd care to share.
Okay. Well, my hobbies. Which is also when I do my writing as well. I just love hiking and nature. I'm out there all the time hiking with my dogs, little dogs. That's my hobby too. I love my little dogs.
What type of dogs do you have?
I have a Schipperke and then a Chihuahua mix.
What's a Schipperke? I've not heard of that.
Schipperke, it's a little tailless black barge dog, and they kind of, I never heard of them either until I took a quiz on the internet. What's my perfect dog? And I'm like, because I usually only rescue animals, and but I took a quiz and it said your perfect dog is a Schipperke, because you put in what you like and don't like about dogs, if they bite people or bark too much or, guard or, and so I looked into it and, oh my gosh, it's the cutest little thing. And there's Schipperke rescues out there, and they're these little black dogs with no tails. There are other colors in different countries like Belgium, but they're real protective. They're called the little mother, and they, like my husband and I, they don't like when we're apart. She runs back and forth between the two of us. She wants to make sure we're always together. They're adorable.
I also like to get rescue dogs. So in fact, the couple we have right now are some of the best dogs we've ever had. So I agree with that. I wish more people would do that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So you say you like to hike and write. Does that mean you like do dictation, or you record into a microphone or something?
Yes. I find that's where my brain is the freest, when I'm out there in nature and I'm hiking and I have my headphones and my microphone, and then I just start like, okay, now what happens between this scene and this scene? Because I have basically my outline set that I've also set when I'm hiking, and then I fill in the scenes, and I hold my press record on my phone, and then I just start. And I'm just more, it's more natural that way. I get people's dialogue more realistic and the action. And sure, I probably throw away like 80% of what I record, but it's there. Otherwise, I'm not going to remember my ideas. And then sometimes I reread what I wrote and I'm like, hey, that was pretty good. It was so natural because I'm just speaking as my characters will speak to each other and bantering back and forth and the details. And then I go in later after I do my editing and I piece together and rearrange things, cut things out. And then I add in the more, like the dialogue tags or the scenes with the details and, all that stuff. But my basic creativity is there already. I've set the groundwork for it.
So do you use Dragon Naturally Speaking to pull it in, or do you have a service you upload the files to?
No, years ago, I did like the dragon thing, and I used to have all these different devices because in the mountains, it's really hard to get any, what's that called? To date it. It would always cut me off or lose what I recorded. But now that just things are so much better, I just go in my email and I just press a little microphone and I just start recording and I email it to myself. And that way it's not lost. And I can rearrange them easier and better rather than I just lost so much when I would go into audio programs and record, because then at the time, I don't know if they still do this, they'd get to a limit. And then if I went past the limit, it would just drop everything. Or if I had a bad connection, it would just drop everything. But I find when I dictate into my email, it just types up the words right there and it's not going to lose them because they're already typed. And so now I kind of just trust that now, and it works great for me. There could be better programs out there now, but I'm just happy with that.
Well, I think that's cool because a lot of people have trouble with dictation, myself included. And there's always debate what program to use. And you're just using some of the natural abilities you have on your phone. I think that's great. Why spend all the money and time and frustration with a program? You've got something that already works.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to be affected with the data being out in the wilderness somewhere. It just seems to be able to just record no matter where I am, I guess. I still remember having problems.
So you've mentioned the mountains in the wilderness. What area of the country do you live in?
I live in Northern California in the heart of wine country. It's like we have this little tiny hamlet of a town and surrounded by trees and it's I just love it. It's beautiful. It's small, but it's also the area is kind of big too. It's a lot of wine. We love wine, so it's a perfect place to live if you love wine.
Yeah, I visited that area. I used to live in San Diego, and we took a few trips up through the mountains. And it's interesting because you go in these winding roads and come around a corner, and then it's like suddenly there's a town, right in front of you.
Right.
And it was almost discovery, driving around like that. It was fun. So you mentioned that you like to walk in the woods and the mountains, and that's inspired you a lot. So tell us a bit about your book that I saw, the Tangled in Time, correct?
Well, it's Tangle of Time.
Tangle of Times. I'm sorry. So
it's okay.
Tell us a bit about that. And, how did the way you dictate and write, how do you think that affected the book?
Well, Tangle of Time is it's a mixed genre. You can't really put it in a category, really. It's time travel, but only to the sense that they end up in another time period rather than it being science fiction where, there's the whole paradox and all that. But it's very historical fiction as well. And these modern day kids, they're in college. They're not like high school or anything. So it's not really a YA book, but these kids, they're just usual self-centered kids. They get stuck in they get stuck in a tunnel. They get buried alive and they have to find their way out. And when they come out, they're in a different time period. And they're learning about life and what they faced back then. It's in 1840. And I carefully picked that time period out because I was looking at a timeline of what happened in the world and but they learn, like the protagonist, she is so, because when we come from here, we're used to, women, sure, we're not paid as much or whatever, but also we can speak our mind and we can run our own business but back then, the husband is in charge of everything. And so our protagonist is not like this. And because they meet with people and they have to live with people, when they get back in time. So, and then they just all kind of grow as well. And then I'm trying to think of what I can say without giving away the
Right.
book too much. But it's exciting because oh yes, the one thing that does happen is they get separated from one of their friends who they have to find, and they can't go back without this friend. But then they can't get back. It's too difficult, and they have to find a way to get back. Okay, we got to get some money so we can buy tools to figure out how to plow our way back home. And how do we get back? We almost died a bunch of times trying to get out of this tunnel, and they're faced with a dilemma. Do they? Well, I don't want to give away the book too much.
No, that's fine. So, don't give anything away. Definitely intriguing people just to find out, especially. There's a lot of people that really like historical time travel adventures. My wife is one of them. She's been reading some books right along that same line. So it's fairly a popular thing right now. I think that's great. Are the settings kind of reminiscent of where you live in California and you walk around, or is it a completely different setting, like the outdoors and all that?
A lot of it's very outdoors. It's in the same state, but it takes place in the Sierra foothills, which are, they're about 3 hours from me. So it's a little different, but I've just spent a lot of time there. And, but it is easier to write because when I am hiking, I'm in the woods, and I'm like, because they live in this cabin in the woods, and everything is, they have to live off the earth, and they have to learn to do things without electricity, where's all their, and then they're trying to remember what can we bring to this world to make life easier. And then they realize, well, I don't know how to make that. I know it exists, but we always had like batteries to make that run, or it's like they just don't know. They're just typical kids. They don't know how to do anything really, but they make things work, and they end up actually benefiting by the knowledge they have of them.
Yeah, I think, knowing my kids, I think they would find it very difficult to be transported like 150 years in the past suddenly. That would be a quick, very stressful thing for them, I'm sure. So
Yes.
Why did you want to write this book? Why did you start writing and say to yourself, I've got to write this and get it out?
I always wanted to write like a time travel. The thing is, when I started reading, when I've been reading books, I personally have always loved books that I didn't know I was learning about something because the book was so interesting, but I come away from that book going, wow, I learned so much about this time period or this area or this culture. And I thought, I want to do that. The problem I had was when I graduated high school or college, I was still baffled about so much of the world. And I'm like, God, why didn't I, pick up a lot of stuff? And I realized I want to be able to, show those people that have had the same kind of education I have, where they didn't really, they're taking more art classes and more, something where you're not really learning about the world as much as you should. So maybe learn about it in your free time when you're reading and don't know you're learning this stuff. And because in my book, we're dealing with a lot of the native populations of California back in 1840. I mean, and what I would, when I started thinking about this book, and I was reading a lot of books or listening to them, I do all my books in audio, I would come back and I'd talk to my husband about, I have this idea, I'm going to do this. And he is one of those people that did have a history background, and his father was a professor at Santa Barbara and was a history professor. And so he would go, well, what about, look at all that, the genocide of the indigenous populations. And he would put these ideas in my head. I'm like, oh my God. And I would take these things and I'd run with them in my book, stuff I'd never thought of. And so he has been a huge help in my writing. And I did that answer that question?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And what you said about learning and not, strictly from the school. I had a book I read very similar to that experience, Guns of the South by Turtle Dove. It's about the Civil War, but as if people from the future time traveled with machine guns and gave them to the South, how it would have changed things.
Oh,
And
wow. That
it's
sounds really
yeah,
good.
it's a great book. And I really liked it because it explored a lot of details about the Civil War. And I learned a lot about the Civil War that I really never understood from school, apart from the whole issue with slavery and some of the things. And I understand it was a fictional book and some of the thoughts and words that people said were fictionalized, not exactly what they said, but it explored the different issues. So I think for your type of book, the historical time travel, especially with the younger kids, I think that you're right. They enjoy that. They like to get into that type of thing.
Yeah. My niece was one of my first beta readers, the poor girl, because this book was kind of going a little bit all over the place. And she said to me, I go, do you think there's too much history in there? Because I did. I cut out like half of it, half the history. But she goes, I liked at my age, because she was in her mid-20s, my age, I forgot so much of it since high school or didn't learn it. I'm thrilled to learn this stuff now when I'm more interested in the world rather than just myself.
Oh, that's pretty good to get someone to say something like that. And I like the fact that your husband jumped in and was helping and suggesting things. Now, you just said that you cut some things out, and I find that interesting too, because a lot of new authors have a problem with, I did, all this research. I've got a whole notebook of research and I want to dump it all into here. And that's what ends up killing their story because they're just trying to dump so much information. But you actually cut some of it out. Why did you choose to do that?
Well, a lot of two reasons. One is because I was constantly reading a lot of books about how to write a good book, and a lot of them say the problem is you learn so much stuff and you tend to you want to tell it all, and that can ruin a good book. And then I went through this company called Entrada Publishing, and they have awesome beta readers. And I went through so many beta readers, and a lot of them were going, sounds like a history teacher or something. So I was getting a lot of flack for too many historic details. So it was painful, but because a lot of it was written and it worked into my story, I had to really cut a lot of stuff out to where it just had just enough. And then finally, the beta readers are going, yeah. I go, well, what would you cut out? Nothing. It's perfect. And I kept getting back with nothing. It's perfect. It's perfect length. Even though it's a little long for a book, or for a young, like a new adult type of length. But they're all saying everything fits in the story. You can't cut anything out anymore. And so that's when I finally stopped chopping.
Well, that's really good because I know it's difficult to find people to want to read your whole book and to give you good feedback like that. It becomes they read it and go, oh yeah, it was good. I liked it. But that's not really helpful. So I think that's great that you found some people willing to do that and give you that feedback.
Yeah.
So the things you cut out, are you possibly going to use them for a sequel or in another book? Or do you have plans for a sequel or some similar book to this?
Definitely. Yeah. There's a total, it's all been written that I've written. Well, that hasn't all been written. There's 4 books. I'm trying to cram it into 3, but there's a sequel and another one, and then the finish. And it's kind of all in outline form. and so I have to plant things in the first book. I had to write a lot of the outlines of my further sequels because I had to plant things in the earlier books to make sure they're there for when they find them in the in the other sequels. And
So the stuff you cut out, you're already putting it
oh yeah,
into
yeah,
the other books?
that was the question I got off my train.
No, that's great.
Um,
I love to hear that.
yeah, I a lot of the stuff I cut out, I save. I use Scrivener, and so I have a way of organizing all those, and I can pull from there. And I'll say facts about plants, or facts about the Nisenan native population there. That is too much if I add it in, but I could add it in another book coming up. So a lot of those I can use, and the other ones I'm just like, well, yeah, they didn't. I was just kind of sharing too much of what I was excited about learning about this history, and I was just so excited. I wanted everyone to learn about it, but it could be boring for other people that just want to have the action continue. So you kind of just have to slide things in and give them little tastes of stuff without overloading them on the whole history thing, and then it gets boring for people.
Did you think, and I've thought about this for some of my books, but adding in a section at the end, like an appendix where you talk about some of the other research you've done, or things like that, or even maybe a companion guide to the world and the story that you could offer as a free reader magnet or something like that. Did you consider anything like that?
I did, and I wish I kept better notes of everything I read and got history and ideas from. Sometimes I'd visit places and speak to the people, go to museums, or it's the internet. I read a lot of books, and it just got kind of overwhelming trying to keep track of it. But I had one of my beta readers is actually this Native American woman from the Ohlone tribe, and I found her by just renting her Airbnb, and we started talking. She's like, yeah, we our tribe, or the Ohlone people that she was from, they didn't get wiped out because they were up in the mountains, and they just got to stay their tribe, and we learned a lot about her people and their whole way of life. And so then after 6 months later, I wrote her an email, and I say, hey, would you beta read my book? And and I barely paid her anything, and she was happy. But she, besides being this excellent editor, she was like, well, this wouldn't happen before the meal or after the meal. You do this before the meal, this certain praying and thinking. And she was just so helpful on the native populations. And even though she didn't know specifically, her tribe is from the coast, and my tribe is more toward the Sierras. But she suggested in the back of the book she goes, I'd be happy to write you if you want more information, check out these, and these.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I just, I was thinking I would do that on the second book, because I was just trying to hustle and get the first one out there, because it took so long to do, and I just wanted to get going on the second one. So I have to try to get a hold of her again and see if she's still willing to do that. And then I have to go through and try to remember where I collected all my facts from. They're all over the place.
I think that's great, because I know when I was in Scouts, we tried to learn a bit about Native American history and some of the ceremonies and various things. And I've always wanted to learn more. So I think if there's a good book that's not just a dry textbook that people would like to read, I think that's great. And you did the research, you did the everything you needed to learn, not just made it up. I think that's wonderful.
Oh my God, there's so much research. I think that's what takes so long in my book is I start writing something. I'm like, wait a second. Did they have this back then? And I have to go research every little tiny thing. I'm like, did they sing songs was that song written yet? Did they use that phrase yet? Did they, and constant researching and verifying all my facts is just so long.
I've heard that from other people, that they get so caught up in the research and want to do so much research that the book doesn't get written at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So it takes a while. And, I work. So, I mean, I can't do this as a living right now because, I don't know how much money you can make off writing a book of love. But so I have to find time where I like on the weekends and so it's like everyone's like, where'd you find time to write? I'm like, well, my poor husband, I have to abandon him a lot, and my children are grown, so they don't mind me not paying attention to them, but you have to balance your life with, and that's why I found, okay, I'll exercise, I'll do my workout while I write, and then that's two birds with that stone, and then so.
Right. Yep. And I've run into the same thing, especially when had several kids in high school, middle school, and then one in college that didn't drive. So every day I was driving and driving and driving, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing with 2.5 hours every day just sitting in my car? So I'd love to learn to dictate like you do and do it well. It doesn't flow from me though.
Oh.
It's difficult. So it's one of those things,
Oh.
I guess. Maybe I just need to do it
just thought
more.
everyone could. I guess. Well, I'm a creative person. I'm a graphic designer and a voice actress, and a lot of the stuff is just. That's just probably the way my brain works. I never thought that not everyone could do that.
Yeah, personally, I find it difficult. I start stumbling more, and then my brain kind of locks up, and I can't figure out where it's coming from. But I do computer development, so I'm at the keyboard all the time. So when I sit down at the keyboard, I actually can type, not quite as fast as my brain thinks, but fairly fast, and it keeps up, and I get it out and things get done, and I can, look up and say, oh, look, I've got 1,000 words already. So I find that interesting.
Wow,
How
you're
different
like the
people are.
opposite of me. See, I
Right.
try to do that, and something comes up and says, "Oh, there's a squirrel that ran by outside," and I'm like, "Oh God."
But that's what's great, because we have all these tools we can use and find what works for us. I mean, I know some people still that will grab a yellow legal pad and a pencil, and I cannot write anything down like that. I can't even read what I write most of the time.
Oh yeah. Well, I thought my biggest find last year were my Bose. How do you pronounce that? Bose headphones.
Yes.
They
Yep.
just block the world out. And like my husband would be in the other room playing, sports on the TV really loud, and I just put on my headphones. I can't hear a thing, and it just saved me. And instead of going, please turn that down.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I have the same problem because our house is very busy with 6 kids with various schedules. So we're always people
Wow.
around. So
Wow.
I like to find time in the mornings when everyone's still sleeping.
Yeah.
So Jen, what are some things that if you went back and started over again, what are some things you learned that you'd do different?
I wouldn't. I would have made my outline more solid because I spent a whole summer writing something I cut out, and I'm like, I spent a whole summer writing that, and then I end up going, you know what? My book's too long, and I just cut that whole all that time of that precious time I don't have. It's all cut out. So that's and instead I would do what I'm doing now that I'm writing book 2 right now, and I'm trying to follow what I've learned, which is I'm not filling in the artwork, like the painting the landscape or the emotions and putting just velvety words to everything. I'm just writing the action. He said, she said, and this happened, that, and then I'm going to go through and polish it once I have the solid story down and it's locked in. Then I'll spend more time massaging everything, and I'll get this book done a lot faster than the first one.
I like that. And I've been wanting to follow up with people 6 months, a year down the road. So when we talk again, I definitely want to ask you about that and see if you think that method of writing helped, because I've heard a few other people lately saying the same thing, that they write a first draft and it's just the speaking and basic action, and then they go back and fill it all in later, but they get the whole book written, just the very basics. I'm interested to find out more of how people think about that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because I didn't know if what I was doing was correct, but I'm glad to hear other people finding that as well.
Yeah. And do you think with this second book that you're outlining, even though you outlined and ripped some parts out, do you think you learned from that and that your outlining is better this time? So the second book will be easier to write, both with the outlining, just because you've already done all that and learned.
Yes, but it's also easier to write because as I was writing book 1, I was writing book 2, 3, and 4 as well.
Got it.
But they're not organized. I just throw them in a folder and they're all at a place, and I have to go through and and in Scrivener, you get these little Post-it notes. You can rearrange your whole outline really easy just by moving, like you're on a bulletin board, moving things around.
Yes.
And it's got a big learning curve, though, that program, but it's invaluable once you learn the basics.
Yeah, a lot of people said, it's got a learning curve and stuff. And this is another thing. Maybe it's just because of the way my brain works, but I thought it was intuitive and simple to use right from the start. I didn't have any trouble and just started doing everything. So
because you're a computer guy. I mean,
yes, yeah, there you go.
Like that.
So I do like Scrivener for what you just said about rearranging things. I just wish the Corkboard that you could do things like you can't hit enter and get a new line. You can't put in like lists and things because it jumps out of the one you're at. So everything's just a big long stream with commas. So I wish it did that.
Oh, I don't have that. I use that. What's that one thing called where it opens another window and another window, and you can just have all of these little windows in front and type a little bit. I haven't run into that problem yet. I wish I had a huge monitor, though. That way I can have this giant corkboard or bulletin board. That's the problem I have. I have to have the type so small I can't see it in order to have a lot of little Post-it notes or little folders in one place and rearrange them. That it's like, God, I just want a bigger screen.
Do you work off of a laptop?
Well, I do, because I refuse to work in my office because that is my workplace. And when I write, I have to separate the two kind of basic careers. And when I write, I will only work on my laptop because in my office, I can't. It's like my other job. It's so, and also I sit out by the pool and I, sit in a lounge chair and with my laptop, I can go anywhere with it. And so that's just, so I am limiting myself on my little laptop screen.
Oh, well, that's nice. And I know a lot of people do stuff like that where they like turn off the internet or things to limit themselves.
Yes.
So how are you marketing it and how's things been going with the book? Is it being received as well as you thought? Anything you've learned from there?
That's a hard question because part of me, I wasn't planning on really marketing it much until I got my second book written, so it would funnel. It's better to have, I thought, so people could buy the second one right after they read the first. So everyone's going, when's your second? And then when I posted, then someone got my book and left this real stupid review that it's almost like they didn't read my book. And I'm like, who is this person? Why would they? So then I hit up all my friends and I got to leave a good review because some person left a stupid review. And I was like so horrified by that. And because my book hadn't really been, the audiobook hadn't even been recorded yet, and I wasn't going to promote it until that. And so, but Amazon limits people, and I don't know how they find out. Anytime I know someone, it's almost like they went on my Facebook and saw my friends or something, but nobody could post reviews if I knew them. Somehow they knew I knew them. And so my friends go, I can't post a review, I can't post. And then they only let so many people, post a review a day. And so a lot of people just didn't get their reviews posted. So, so then I hired, people to, these promotion services. And the problem is, everything just costs money and you don't really want to, you can't really spend a lot of money because you're not going to make it back unless your book is a big seller, you know.
Yeah. And I know Amazon actually does check and crack down on reviews. If you know somebody, they seem to get those reviews ripped out pretty quickly, actually. So that is a problem. It's a chicken and the egg. You can sell some books if you have reviews, but you can't get reviews because nobody's buying your book.
Yeah. So I mean, I like the people, and the people really read them, and it's their opinion. But if they know me, they don't let them. I guess they'll know they're not going to bash it and put a 1 star or something. But I've been really happy with the reviews I got, except for a couple of real weird reviews.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I pulled your book up on Amazon and I'm looking at it, and this Deny Me Not that gave you the 3-star review.
Oh yeah.
It looks like every book that this person reviews, they give 3, maybe 4 stars to. So
Oh
you get
yeah.
that. So they love to read, but obviously don't like anything they do read. So.
Yeah, and they the one person said, "Oh, this is a weird book because they had weird parents," and I'm like, "Well, that was the point. Their parents are quirky and a little odd because I don't know. I like odd and quirky things, and so that's why they didn't like it. And some people are saying, "Oh, there were some gross parts." I'm like, well, yeah, there's got to be gross parts, and there's got to be violence. There's some violence, and there's some horrible scenes, but there's also some good scenes. And then my book is fairly clean. There's no like big sex scenes or anything, but some people complained because there was too much sex, and I'm like, sex? And so it was. Those are like. I don't know. I guess you can never please everyone.
No, yeah.
That.
I got a friend that writes military sci-fi, and the cover shows a spaceship shooting at another spaceship with one of them exploding in outer space. And it's called, something like Star something or other. And somebody left a 1-star review because they said it didn't have enough romance. Okay. So yeah, don't feel too bad. The advice I've been hearing from everybody is don't worry about the bad reviews and move on and work on your next book. And you're right. Writing the next book will help the first book move much better. So
yeah. And then I'll really get going on the marketing and stuff. And I found Twitter is like so useless with everyone's like, no, you got to have a good platform. You got to get all that. And I'm like, but it doesn't help me at all.
Well, and that's the other thing. If you've got a new adult book or young adult type book, then going to the social media that they go to would probably be the best bet, which I'm not even sure what that is. Facebook is for middle-aged people now, not kids. I write middle grade fiction, so I'm not even sure where those kids hang out. So it's something I guess we'll have to figure out and talk about next time, see if we've nailed our audience's social media habits.
Yes, there'll be new ones, and with all this stuff going on, hating this platform, hating that social media thing, right. And who will survive and what new ones will come out.
Right. And we'll see. And I think it's a great time to write a book because people are home. They want something to do. And eventually people really do get tired of staring at screens. So I think more people are going to want more books. So Jen, before we finish up here, tell us a bit about where to find you, where the book's available, and any of the social media that you are on.
Well, you can find my book on, well, of course, Amazon, and it's kind of everywhere. Barnes and Noble, Nook, Cook, or whatever. It's on Chirp and BookBub, and let's see. Oh, and the audio is fairly inexpensive on it's on Chirp, and I think it's Audible is taking their time putting my book on their site. I guess they take like 6 weeks or something, but it's out on Chirp. And I
heard they've been running way behind lately.
Yeah. And I mean, it took a while too to get it recorded because of the pandemic. But I had this really great narrator. She was able to, because one of my characters is a Scandinavian man, or he's Norwegian and he's gruff, and she pulled that off really good. So I'm really happy the way it turned out. I mean, because I'm an audio book listener. I mean, who has time to read book with your eyes? I mean, I just don't have time. And so I have to, like, when I'm not riding hiking, I am listening, and which is, half the time. And, I'm like, oh, I need to know more about, this native group. And so I buy an audio book and I listen to it, or I need to learn how to write better. And I just listen to constant audiobooks. So that's why audio is very important to me. And so my website is JinWestcott .com, and it's WESTCOTT, and that's my website, and has all the links, all the active links where you could purchase it. There's a bunch of them, tons of places, and then we publish it through this company called Biscuit Tuesday Press. My husband and I opened our own publishing company, so because he's going to be writing a bunch of books as well. So we're like, hey, let's just open our own publishing company. And
well, there's something more for us to talk about next time too.
Yeah,
I didn't even realize that. Okay. So, Jen, I appreciate it. I think your book looks great. It's something, even though you may have a little sex and stuff in it, I think it's something that the newest teenager in my house may enjoy. So let's get it and see if he does like it. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. It's been really great learning about you and your book. I do hope that we can get together sometime in the future and talk about your publishing and your second book.
Great. I would like that. Thank you so much.
And I hope you have a great rest of your summer and a great day. I really would love to come out hiking with you sometime out in California. I haven't done that in so long. So, all right, Jen, it's been great talking to you.
Thank you for listening to Discovered Wordsmiths. Come back next week and listen to another author discuss the road they've traveled, and maybe
Thank you for listening to
Discovered Wordsmiths.
It might
Come
be
back
you.
next week and listen to another author discuss the road they've traveled, and maybe sometime in the near future, it might be you.